Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my tight end strength of schedule for the rest of the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the rest of season schedule for the tight end position from week 7 to 16 to give you guys some perspective on who truly has the easiest matchups. As you guys know, on a typical basis on the weekly starter sets, I always talk about matchups because I truly do believe matchups play a big part in fantasy football. So today, we're going to be talking about the tight end position and who are some guys, who are some talents that potentially we should be going out and trading for. I know many of you already have stud tight ends that are in that top 8 echelon that are, unreplaceable unless in fact you are on a bye week. But for those of you who are not, for those of you who are dealing with a Will Disley injury or a Jared Cook injury, or potentially you drafted OJ Howard, I have a couple names here for the rest of season schedule that might be able to help you out in order to help you win a fantasy championship and make sure that your tight end position is relevant going forward. Now, before we begin, let me remind all of you, if you haven't yet already, click that subscribe button, click that bell notification button to be notified on my latest content whenever it arrives. Also, don't forget to click the like button on today's video. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Hey guys, how's it going? All right, hopefully everyone's doing well. I don't know why my camera is not in the right spot, so we will just adjust it like that perfectly. All right, so hope everyone's doing well. We're talking about the tight end position. As you can see to the left of me, this is typically how much defenses are giving to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis. You must have seen this yesterday if you watched the tight end starter sit video. So basically, to give you some perspective on how I calculated this, obviously the Arizona Cardinals are the worst defense against the tight end position. Therefore, if a team plays them, they get 1 point. We add up all the totals of the remaining schedule, whether it's 9 or 10 games, and therefore get the summation of that divided by the remaining games, and that on average will be the difficulty of their schedule going forward, and we'll get a little bit better sense of how difficult the schedule is. So as I calculated that, let's go ahead and check that out. All right, so according to the calculations on the very left, the easiest strength of schedule for the rest of season for the tight end position belongs to the New Orleans Saints, going all the way down, who has the most difficult schedule rest of the season for the tight end position, the Washington Redskins. So to give you guys some perspective, let's check this out really quickly. In terms of the numbers on screen, 12 means that on average, the defense difficulty on a weekly basis for the next 9 weeks for the New Orleans Saints is going to be at a 12, which isn't bad at all. That's a top 12 play, and really is a pretty favorable matchup. On the other hand, when we have like the Washington Redskins and the Baltimore Ravens on the bottom, if you guys go check out Mark Andrews' schedule that he's played thus far, I think he's had the easiest strength of schedule thus far at the tight end position. Going forward, it is far more difficult, and we might see a little bit of a decline potentially, but I hopefully believe that his target counts, his usage is going to keep him in line with what he's been able to produce thus far this season. Now, if we look to the right of that, we're looking at the playoff strength of schedule. What teams have the most favorable matchups going into weeks 14, 15, and 16 of the fantasy football playoffs? Now, obviously it's the Arizona Cardinals, but they don't have a tight end that is constantly used within the offense. And we have the Carolina Panthers, Mr. Greg Olsen. And then there's a pretty steep decline in terms of, on average, the difficulty of the schedule going forward. The number right there next to those teams is the 3 games calculated combined. I didn't divide it by 3 to kind of figure it out. I just threw it as that. So either way, if you divide it by 3, that'll pretty much get you the calculated average of the difficulty of the defense going forward. So what really pops out to me thus far? Now, obviously, if you are a Zach Ertz owner or a Travis Kelce owner, George Kittle, Hunter Henry, these guys, they're studs, right? Evan Ingram, Darren Waller, Mark Andrews. These guys thus far this season have been the best tight ends. Austin Hooper, we can't forget that guy. Why? Because he's number 1. These guys have been the best tight ends thus far this season by a pretty wide margin. Now, if you're thinking, okay, potentially I want the best tight end going forward. Well, if you have one of those tight ends, probably, there really isn't much of an improvement that you can make. Sure, you can go and get guys like you see, like the Los Angeles Chargers have the 5th easiest schedule going forward. Hunter Henry has a pretty easy schedule going forward. But are you going to be able to go and get him? So does, George Kittle, another stud tight end at the number 9 spot there. But above them, there really isn't any established tight ends for those respective teams yet. but we will talk about them and maybe potentially, because of how easy their schedules are, they could potentially get a boost going forward. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about that. Let's get some perspective on who really has the easiest schedules going forward. Let's look at these three players on screen. We have Jared Cook, TJ Hockenson, Gerald Everett. These are three teams that have the four easiest schedules going forward at the tight end position. Talking about Jared Cook, number one, he has the easiest schedule going forward. Unfortunately, he has already been ruled out this week to not play against the Chicago Bears. This offense already is going to be down Jared Cook and Alvin Kamara this week. So for those of you who are thinking about fantasy football, that's already unfortunate. But then after, in week 8 through 16, I mean, this team has a lot of green matchups. You get to play Arizona, then you get to hit a bye, then you come back and play Atlanta in a fiery shootout. Tampa Bay is going to be a shootout. Carolina will be a shootout. Atlanta again. Then you get the 49ers. Sure, that's going to be a difficult game, but then the last two games of your regular season schedule in order to make the playoffs with Drew Brees under center, let's remember, is going to be against Indianapolis and Tennessee, two teams that are very susceptible to opposing tight ends in terms of giving them a lot of points on a weekly basis, just to kind of give you some perspective. Then moving on, let's talk about TJ Hockenson, another guy that is sitting in this mid-tier tight end to the lower tier because of the injury that he sustained. A guy that potentially could have been big. He came out and had a starting first game of the season, or of his career, in fact, and popped off for a 20-point game. Since then, hasn't been great, but going forward for the rest of the season, we get to see some favorable matchups. Yes, you have to play against Minnesota and the Giants here, but those aren't terrible matchups all in all. You get to play against Oakland, Chicago, Dallas, Washington, Chicago, Minnesota, Tampa Bay, then Denver. As of right now, if any of you did watch the game on Monday night between the Packers and the Lions, I mean, TJ Hockenson did drop a touchdown. He dropped a touchdown in the end zone. As he hit the ground, it popped out of his hands. So that week 6 performance truly should have been a 10 to 12 point game. But going forward, I hopefully will see more incorporation of TJ Hockenson within this offense to kind of give him some value, because really we haven't seen enough usage of him in this offense. Typically because there are other guys that are ahead of him in terms of target counts. There's going to be the Kenny Galladay, the Marvin Jones. But outside of that, really, Hockenson has a pretty good chance going forward. The other guy I wanted to mention having the second easiest strength of schedule going forward, Gerald Everett, receiving tight end for the Los Angeles Rams. Obviously, they have Tyler Higbee. Higbee's gotten some work in the passing game, but all in all, he is not the better receiving target or threat at the tight end position for these Rams. But look at what Everett gets. I mean, goodness gracious, after the bye week, you get to play against some of the easiest teams in terms of tight ends. Pittsburgh, Chicago, Baltimore, okay, those are some tough defenses all in all. They're going to put pressure on Jared Goff. But then you get Arizona, you get Seattle, then you get Dallas. I mean, this is a guy that in the fantasy football playoffs could make a big statement and make a big difference, especially if the Rams are not up to par in terms of their schedule. They're going to have to pick up a lot of wins late in the season. It's going to force them to have to pass a lot. Gerald Everett will be a part of that offense, just to kind of give you some perspective. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about 3 more tight ends really quickly. We have O.J. Howard. Like I mentioned earlier, perhaps you drafted O.J. Howard. Perhaps O.J. Howard was drafted by another team, and yet he is sitting on waivers as we speak. This is the entire point of this episode. We want to be able to look at strength of schedules and kind of determine, are the guys that we have, good enough or not even good enough? Are there other guys available that could potentially even be better? I wanted to just go ahead and point out that after this bye week, which I'm assuming a lot of people have dropped O.J. Howard on this bye week, considering his performances this year, he comes into a pretty good slate of matchups, 3 back-to-back contests between Tennessee, Seattle, and Arizona, which truly, I believe, if in fact O.J. Howard isn't traded before the deadline, can be pretty serviceable for him going forward. I mean, let's be honest. These defenses aren't great against the tight end position, and they never have been. I will show you a stat in about 5 minutes showing you just how many points or the reason why these teams get destroyed by the tight end position in terms of yardage and touchdowns. But either way, I think O.J. Howard, not rest of season, potentially this upcoming slate could get him back on track, and then potentially we see against the New Orleans, Atlanta games, him revitalize his season as of right now. All right, moving on. Hunter Henry, George Kittle, 2 studs, certainly, but they're the 2 studs that have the easiest matchups going forward at the tight end position. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes down, it's going to hurt Travis Kelce. Obviously, Zach Ertz has not performed up to par because he is yet to see as many targets as he did last season. I mean, on pace last season, Comparatively to this year, just they're not even close to being the same. But either way, these are two studs that have two of the easiest matchups going forward in terms of the tight end position. Really wanted to key in on these guys. Looking at what Hunter Henry has available. Obviously, many of us drafted Hunter Henry because we knew, when you are replacing Antonio Gates in this offense, you are going to have inherent value that cannot be replaced, because this offense from the Chargers and Phillip Rivers love to target the tight end position. There's a reason why Hunter Henry didn't pop off the screen in 2017. It's because he split snaps with Antonio Gates that season. Now that we get an opportunity to see Hunter Henry by himself, not injured anymore, dealt with the ACL, dealt with the knee. Now he's back, dropped a 26-point game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Going forward, this is a guy that could make some pretty big, impact on your team or on the league itself in terms of the tight end position, and make himself one of these elite guys at the top of the pack. Against Tennessee, Chicago, Green Bay, Oakland, Kansas City into a bye week, then playing against Denver, Jacksonville, Minnesota, then Oakland again. Not bad at all. And then talking about the last tight end, the guy that truly might end up becoming the number one tight end by season's end. As of right now, George Kittle, he's got a lot of work to do to catch Austin Hooper and Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram missed the game, so then he went ahead and forfeited his chances there. But here comes Austin Hooper. He's going to have a 10-game slate going forward, in which really you get to play against Arizona twice. Those are going to be two ginormous performances that look at the projected doesn't even have him any higher. He has like 0.2 higher than his regular projected. I don't understand this stuff, but in terms of what Yahoo's doing, I'm telling you, he's going to have some monster games going forward. As you can see in week 5 and 6, comparatively to what he did in weeks 1 through 3, the guy was putting up 8 points. Now that they finally continue to target him as their number one receiving option, he is going to see more and more value, more opportunity. It's only going to lead to success for George Kittle. And the schedule going forward, even though it's not green and it's not green light go, it's still pretty favorable comparatively to a lot of other tight ends in the National Football League. And that's why I wanted to kind of go over that. All right, let's go ahead. Let's get back here. Now, I did mention that I was going to show you a graphic. That's exactly what we're going to do, but I have to switch off to this other page. All right, so as you can see here, according to, this is the statistics through weeks 1 through 6, does not count the Thursday Night Football game. As of right now, this is on the very left, we have the teams in the NFL, Arizona through Washington, and how many yards they've given up to opposing running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends thus far this season. And in terms of how much of the percentage goes to those respective positions and how much those positions have scored thus far. As you can see, the Arizona Cardinals, by a wide margin, give up the most yards and most touchdowns to the tight end position than anyone else in the National Football League, and it's not even close. What the heck is going on with my camera usage here, huh? I thought I adjusted this thing. Oh, that's why. Never mind, I understood why. Okay, anyway, so 599 yards thus far, 7 touchdowns to opposing tight ends. This is a pretty ridiculous stat. Every single game, someone's scoring a touchdown on these Arizona Cardinals in terms of the tight end position. And it's not a surprise that when we have Evan Ingram so high this week playing against this defense, and we have George Kittle that gets to play them twice going forward, it only brings them value. But in terms of other teams that are giving up points to the tight end position, we have Kansas City. You see, a lot of points. Unfortunately, Noah Fant last night. Who the heck is Kevin Fant? Interesting. Noah Fant last night, rookie out of Iowa. Unfortunately, even though he is a talented prospect out of the NFL draft, a first-round guy for the Denver Broncos, he had so many opportunities to make so many plays against this Kansas City defense, and he was just a rookie last night. So guys like that, you just can't trust. Rookies are very, very tricky. That's why Hawkinson is still a tricky play going forward. But anyway, I wanted to kind of give you guys some perspective in terms of what kind of usage teams are giving up to opposing wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, but specifically tight ends going forward. Look at that. The Carolina Panthers, in terms of wide receivers, giving up 75% of the yards to them. Oh my goodness. Hey, they're getting some picks as of late. They're getting the pass rush going. They're getting some points defensively. So it doesn't kill them all in all. But anyway, kind of show you those stats. Let's go ahead and jump back to this. Anyway, that's pretty much it. In terms of value, in terms of guys that you might want to be targeting, sure, there are better schedules for like the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. But, Darren Fells, we need to see more production, more consistency, more targets in order to kind of feel more confident that way. Also, Jacksonville, who's their tight end? Jeff Swaim, he's injured. O'Shaughnessy's out for the season. Who's going to step up and be that, shining light for that offense in terms of the tight end position? We have Pittsburgh Steelers. Vance McDonald last week was out, in terms of snap share, was outshared by Nick Vannett, who was just brought in the week prior. What's the deal there? There are a lot of questions. Sure, the Buffalo Bills, they have Devlin Knox. He can come in, maybe do something there. Tennessee has Delaney Walker. The Seattle Seahawks have Luke Wilson. These aren't great tight ends. These guys are not elite. The elite tight ends are typically sitting at the bottom of this list, dealing with tough matchups going forward. But either way, I wanted to go ahead and highlight this in terms of, the fantasy playoffs for the 2019 season. There are some teams here and there you could pick off, but all in all, I think, it's as expected. The tight end position is a little bit tricky. And yes, you're going to probably stick with your studs, but if you can go ahead and trade for guys like Kittle, or especially Kittle because he has no bye week going forward, that's not a bad move to make at this point. And maybe a little too late considering how good he's been as of late and how poor he started. But if you were someone that invested into him early, that's absolutely fantastic. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank you for spending today's spending today, whatever the heck, watching this video. Until Sunday, we have the 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time live stream. We're going to be talking about fantasy football. A lot of players injured, so make sure you get there at 8:30 because we're going over the out list, and then we're going to have updated rankings at every position for week 7. So thank you again for watching. If you haven't yet already and you want to go ahead and ask as many flex questions as possible, go down to the description of the video where my Patreon link is there. If you support me on Patreon, I can answer all of your 2019 fantasy football questions. Much appreciated, guys. And until next time, I will see you guys. Peace.